All right, the first thing I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about myself because who I am feeds into what I'm going to talk about. You'll see that I've been in the Army, and you'll see that French words, well, it is a French word, essayons, which means we shall try. Now, what slogan does that belong to? It belongs to the Army Engineers, and that's what I was for about 26 years. For two of those 26 years, pardon me, 26. And then for 2 years, altogether spending 28, but for two of those 28 years, I was a military police officer, and that'll figure in later. Now, this again says a little bit of something about myself, and since I was an Army officer, you can bet that this was an important symbol for me. And symbols, whether it's a castle for engineers or whether it's a United States flag, you're going to see that symbols figure into this presentation in a very important way, but you're going to see very different sorts of symbols, and we'll talk about those as we go along. Now, I'm also a Christian, and that figures into who I am. And you see that PhD on the end of my name. I've been, for 50 years, a teacher, a college professor. So all of that is about me. An Army officer, a Christian, patriotic, an engineer, and even a military police officer. So that tells you a little bit about myself, and I'm going to spend more time than you might like my telling about myself. Now, you've seen this picture of me. This was taken several years ago, and that cat is a full-grown cat. Now I'm a cat crazy guy. Just got to tell you about that. Anyway, that's me, a cowboy country singer with his cat. This was me about 30 years ago when I married Sue. This was a few years back at Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. This is my youngest son, his wife, and our new granddaughter. This was several years ago. You're going to see the granddaughter again in a few minutes. You can see that they're rather proud of their newborn, to say the least. She's only a day old or 2 days old there. And that's the way he treats his daughter all the time. He greets her with big kisses and she comes running after him. Now you're going to see and hear her.
Take a deep breath. Okay.
Now that's her at age 3. This was just a few weeks ago. So you get a little bit of something about my family, but I'm going to continue with it. The taller man of the two is my oldest son. He's age 45. He's a psychiatrist. The guy in the background is his nephew, my grandson. This is my grandson with the woman that he intends to marry. She is his fiancée. This is that same grandson with his sister. The sister that you see there, we raised her up ourselves from age 13 until she married this past October. This is my second oldest grandson with the woman that he plans to marry. She is a nurse in Canada and plans to emigrate and to work as a nurse here. Listen
I grew
carefully.
up in Cuba, and I never thought that Cuba would become a communist country. Many people at that time warned Cuba that what was going on was a communist takeover, but we say no, that won't happen here. No one even dreamed that. And I see it, the same thing repeating here in the United States now. And I feel very uncomfortable about, because I know what is the end of it. And I know that after a while, there will be absolutely nothing that the American people will be able to do. And they will lose everything they own, everything they know. And don't even think that you will be even safe inside your own house, because you won't be. They will come and get you wherever you are. They will take your arms. They will take everything, and your way of life, everything. And you will be just a pawn of the state.
Now, what you saw of my family, and you saw quite a bit of it in a very brief time, and I didn't tell you much about it, but everything that this man says threatens that family and is contradictory to all those symbols that I showed you about myself. And probably some of those symbols about myself, probably some of those apply to you. This is a Cuban who's emigrated to the United States in the 1950s, 1957. Fidel Castro took over Cuba. It's been a communist country ever since. This is one of the men who escaped. I personally know another man. His name, well, he's deceased now, but his name is Jose Acosta. He died at about age 80, but in about 2012 he came to see me in the library in Sevierville to tell me something very, very similar to what this man just told you. Jose told me in person. Here's his story. By 30 minutes, just by 30 minutes, his life was saved by being late to a rally point in the Sierra Madre Mountains during the Cuban Revolution, where all of his college chums had been killed. He happened to avoid that during the Cuban Revolution. That would be about 1956 or 1957. Jose's father sent him to the United States, got him out of Cuba. He went to the University of Virginia, as I recall, and remained here for quite a while. And then he emigrated to Venezuela. So he lived in Cuba, a communist country. He moved to Venezuela, which became a communist country, with an auto parts business there, and not just there in Venezuela, but in several parts of South America. He had auto parts stores. But as you know, Venezuela turned communist as well. And before it became a real mess for him, he came back to the United States and got into real estate here. When he saw me in that library conversation that I told you about just a little bit earlier, in that conversation he said, "Mark, the same thing is happening here in the United States that I saw in Cuba, that I saw in Venezuela. The same thing is happening here." And the man that you see on the screen there, Jose was just echoing what that man said in about a minute and a half. Not only did I speak to Jose, a native Cuban who emigrated to the United States, but I also spoke to a man in Anderson County, just north of Knoxville, who was a refugee, not a refugee, but he emigrated from Poland after Poland already was freed from communist domination, but he lived in Poland when it was under communist domination. He told me the same thing about Poland and the United States that the man you see on the screen said, and that Jose Acosta said. So that's one Pole and two Cubans telling me the same thing. Now, all of that threatens those symbols that you first saw about me and threatens my family. It threatens you and your family. These people know what they're talking about. And I've even been to a communist country, East Germany and East Berlin. I know what it looks like. I know how the people behave. I know how the people are oppressed. It's awful. Now, here is what those people intend to destroy. They destroyed it in Blasquez, Cuba. This is capitalism, and it's depicted here in a negative sort of way. The almighty dollar is the most important thing in the communist view about capitalism, and they hate that. They hate also the people who are at the top, whether it's a king, whether it's a president, it doesn't matter. So at the top, of course, is the money, and they say that's the all-embracing goal of capitalism. And then if you'll just read what it says there, we will rule you. Now, I don't know if you feel ruled in our constitutional republic or not, but anyway, what they depict there are kings and autocrats. Then religion is depicted as we will fool you. They look askance upon that, and communist countries really don't recognize that, and they try to squash it. And in China right now, they are squashing Christianity, and worse even than the way that Christians are being dealt with in China. The Muslim population there, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 million, they are in what they call re-education camps. What they are is prison camps. So they don't like the money aspect, except when they have it. They don't like being ruled. They don't like people over them. And they don't like religion. And they don't like the police. They don't like the military. And so that's why it says, we shoot you. And then it shows on the next level the people just having a really good time, and everybody is supported by the workers, and they're just being hammered down by the weight of those who are over them. The money, the people ruling, the people fooling, the people shooting, and the people eat, drink, and be merry. Well, these people are being hammered down in the view of communists who hate capitalism. Now, if you hate capitalism, you're crazy, because the computer you're looking at right now is produced by it. East Germany never produced them. Let's just put it that way, okay? None of those communist countries produce anything like that. And what one of the communist countries that is producing stuff, much of the production capacity is being pulled out of China and placed elsewhere, because the rulers there under that system are unfriendly to any other sort of system. So it's capitalism, what you're looking at here, this pyramid that the communists, the socialists, wish to destroy. Now, here is one group of people, 10 points of action for the revolutionary abolitionist movement. Here are their 10 points, and I'm just going to zip through some of them. Liberation will be won by any means necessary. Think of burning buildings, looting, breaking windows, tipping over police cars, the police doing nothing because the politicians won't let them. Liberation will be won by any means necessary. Here's what they have to say also, and this applies with regard to the police. We will live with dignity in a world without prisons. That's not really possible to do, to have an orderly world without prisons, because there are always some people who act in a criminal way, and that started with Cain's killing of Abel. There will be no government. No person or group will have power over another. Communities will make decisions about how they live and will make sure that everyone has what they need to live a dignified life. Now, I don't know how they do that if they've destroyed the whole system that produces things that people need. It's called capitalism. And listen to what the end goal is, number 10. Militant networks will defend our revolutionary communities. Liberation begins where America dies. Note the symbol. It is a fiery red star. Red is the color. The star, like you see there, applies to communism and socialism anywhere you find it across the world. And you aren't going to like that symbol compared with the ones that identify you. Now you're going to learn about this revolutionary abolitionist movement. This is how they see themselves. It comes from their organization.
To those committed to abolishing slavery. To those who want liberation for all. We announce the formation of the Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement. The United States was built on slavery, and despite the American Civil War, this oppression never ended. The abolitionist movement fought against this tyranny, but modern slavery and mass brutality persist unchecked. Fascism is on the rise. The state has openly declared war on our communities, threatened to ethnically cleanse Latinos, criminalize Muslims, destroy indigenous land, and oppress the LGBTQ community, while continuing to murder and incarcerate black people. The revolutionary abolitionist movement unequivocally states that the plantation system must be destroyed. Today, the anarchist struggle and anti-state feminism are flourishing, and authoritarian modes of resistance are now discredited. The revolution in Rojava in northern Syria has set a new standard. With a foundation in feminism, ecology, anti-state organizing, and armed struggle, it has actualized a path towards liberation beyond 20th century nationalism. With the founding of groups like the International Revolutionary People's Guerrilla Forces, it is clear that this is the time for anarchist revolutionaries to act without hesitation. We declare our solidarity with the international anti-fascist and anarchist struggle and propose concrete steps in the fight for abolition. Revolutionary abolitionists must fight hand in hand with those facing oppression. We intend to establish a new underground railroad to free people from bondage. By building revolutionary self-defense networks, connecting them to one another, and developing militant strategies in our neighborhoods, our network will create the capacity to destroy state power and defend our communities. A new global paradigm for revolution has been established, to be taken up by dedicated revolutionaries, autonomous territories, guerrillas in armed struggle, and all those engaged in the global drive towards liberation and away from statehood, capitalism, patriarchy, and domination. We call on anti-state revolutionary groups to join the revolutionary abolitionist movement and send this message to our comrades to help build the capacity to burn down the American plantation once and for all.
Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement, RAM. And these people and others like them in different organizations, but with these same symbols that you see on this screen, these people intend to ram it down the American throat. Here's another group.
We've gained access to a group of militant anti-fascists known as Antifa.
Are you filming now?
They don't usually like cameras around. Some cover their faces, and others want
to stick their head out of the ground and say, we're going to be here on this day to march in support of our white greatness. That's gross. And that's when people organize, get together, and bash.
Hard strikes to the Adam's apple trachea area. Really good.
In dozens of interviews, fault lines caught a glimpse behind the mask of Antifa, questioning activists about the controversial tactics they've used to counter hate crimes. White supremacists have found a platform with the election of Donald Trump, but so have their adversaries, movement. But their fight has found center stage in the polarized climate of Trump's America.
If anything comes up for you or you're triggered, in this environment, we care about your inner safety as well as your physical safety. That's how we roll as Antifa. We love people.
This is the collective of researchers, waging information warfare to expose bigotry.
If your neighbor is a neo-Nazi who believes that the race war is imminent and wants to bring it about, we think you have a right to know that.
This is the street medic, tending to the wounds of violent protests.
During a lot of the Antifa actions, we're talking about stabbings, and we're talking about blunt force trauma wounds to the head, to the arms, to the legs. That's caused by police and by fascists.
And this is Antifa, from the view of a Trump supporter who can't seem to shake them.
There's a bunch of kids who call them anti-fascists, and they're acting like fascists themselves. It's kind of sad.
Antifa is a loose collection of organizations and ideas with no party line and no formal leadership. In the last year, they've been defined more by their street tactics than anything else.
They show up in the helmets and the...
Okay, it's important to note here that whether it is the revolutionary abolitionist group, the RAM group, or whether it is Antifa or whatever group that claim they are against the fascists, the thing about it is the fascists are bad, and these two groups that I just talked about are bad. One group are fascists, the other group are communists, and they behave in the same way, whether they are white supremacists and in great numbers, or whether, and those are also referred to as Nazis or neo-Nazis, fascists, or whether they are the communists, Antifa or RAM, or other organizations like that. They behave the same way, violent, anarchistic, anti-order, violence. They, both sides of those, are a threat to that family that I identified, and they are a threat to me, and they are a threat to you. You'll notice each one of those groups has an enemy. Antifa and RAM, the enemy are the fascists, although the fascists and they behave in the same way, violent. And then the fascists would tell you, the white supremacists would tell you that these people are the enemy, and these white supremacists if they are in sufficient numbers, behave the same way as these communists. No different. And in fact, I had a white supremacist student several years back. I maintained contact with him so that I will know precisely how those people behave and what they have planned. We're in fairly regular contact, this guy and I, and we don't think anywhere near the same. We argue all the time. I can't convince him that my family, which is multiracial, is important, and he certainly can't convince me that white people are God's gift to the world.
I got a question for you protesters out there. I got a question for you SJWs out there. For all you people that put in that little black box on your Instagram, I got a question for you. What have you accomplished? What has been accomplished by your virtue signaling? What has been accomplished by all of your protesting and looting and vandalizing property? What have you accomplished? Somebody riddle me this. How in the world, how on God's green earth are you protesting the death of one man, which leads to you destroying the lives of multiple other black people, multiple black businesses, destroying the economic success of multiple cities all around the country, and you have fervor, you have energy, you have passion when the black man get killed by a white police officer, yet, when the brother kill a brother, you don't care. When the police officer, former police officer, 77-year-old man, retired captain on the police department, done spent 38 years of his life protecting and serving, show up to a call for service, because you know when you're a cop and when you serve people that long, it ain't just a job, it's in your spirit. Show up to protect the pawn shop, being a good Samaritan, a good citizen, a good man, a good father, a good grandfather, a good leader in the community, and you take that man's life and y'all video record him losing his life, nobody renders aid, and the man who did this probably ain't never gonna get caught because y'all won't even snitch. What have you accomplished? What have you accomplished? I'm not understanding the logic behind the way people act today in America. I'm sick of seeing black folks, and I'm white people, I'm gonna get to you next. I'm sick of seeing black folks being so disingenuous, being dishonest about their affairs, that they have the whole world kissing their toenails. Black people that are honest. I'm not talking about black people that want to be down with the crew, you want to hang out, you want to still get no negative interaction with police. You may not like that you were stopped on the traffic stop because you know you were speeding, but you didn't think he caught you, but he caught you, and then you want to argue with him as if it didn't happen. Most black people do not have negative interactions with police officers. 44 million black people in the United States of America, and new 2019, 9 African Americans were shot who were unarmed. Everybody knows that just because you're unarmed don't mean you're not a threat. But for the sake of argument, only 9 people have had a negative interaction with a police officer that led to their death out of 44 million black people in this country. Go to 2020, this year, there's been 3, and Breonna Taylor is one of them. And she got caught up in a warrant in the crossfire for miscommunication with her boyfriend, who she did either going to be the police or some thugs coming to take drugs out of her house. He ends up shooting a police officer, and she gets caught in the crossfire. She's added to the statistic. Outside of her, it's been 2. Out of 44 million black people in the United States of America, there's been 2 that have been shot unarmed. And the other 2 people were doing something they had no business doing. And I'm not saying it's justified or not. I don't know. They didn't get charged, so I'm assuming that the justice system determined that it was justified, like all the other justified shootings. But y'all haven't accomplished nothing. You're ruining the reputation of your own people. People looking at TV, watching black people beat the snot out of people, rob businesses, kill other black people with no mercy, pulling guns on black women in parking lots because you're so desperate and deranged and animalistic. And let me get to you white people. White people, I need you to hear me real clearly. You better stop with all of that BS virtue signaling. You saying you have white privilege don't somehow make me feel any better about how racist you are. The fact that you believe in white privilege shows me that you are cognitively dissonant from reality. You are telling black people when you say you have white privilege or acknowledging your white privilege or that you have it better in life, that you're better than black people, that you're going to go further in life than black people, and that black people need you to somehow acknowledge and give them a handout so they can have a decent life. You're not operating with common sense. And all this virtue signaling is not doing nothing but perpetuating, inflaming, and fanning the fire. Y'all fanning the fire. Y'all getting on y'all knees on the sidewalk to confess your white privilege. And if none of y'all was racist and none of y'all owned slaves and none of y'all was alive during Jim Crow, then what are you doing? What are you actually accomplishing? Y'all out here protesting in solidarity. To show solidarity with who? Some of y'all don't even know who George Floyd was. A man that has been in and out of prison. A man that does not care and have total disregard for the life of other people, i.e. when he was arrested for prison. And then he's found outside of the state where he lived at, where his wife and his kid, or at least his girl and his kid, live in Houston, Texas. He's in Minnesota on methamphetamines, resisting arrest from the police officers, trying to buy stuff with counterfeit money. And y'all out here giving life and limb to support somebody you don't even know, to support this idea of oppression in the community that is unsubstantiated. I've been black my whole life, grew up in an all-black community. We're not oppressed. We're not oppressed. We oppress ourselves through cultural dynamics that we refuse to identify. It ain't the white man, it ain't the system. The system will make you rich if you do the right things. How do you think Jay-Z? How do you think P. Diddy? How do you think Michael Jordan? How do you think LeBron James? How do you think Madam C.J. Walker in the early 1900s, the first female millionaire to ever exist out of any race? How do you think that Ben Carson got to where he's at? One of the greatest men to ever live. Ben Carson has done things that nobody has done in the whole world. Came from a single parent home. Mama couldn't read. The system ain't against you. You are against you. People are brainwashing you to be against you. They're brainwashing you to be against them. So then they appear to be against you. Wake up, people. I make these videos. I go to war with y'all, for y'all, so that people can wake up like I did. I was a victim of that mentality. Oh, the white man this, the police this, and then I grew up and I grew out. I grew up and I got saved. God changed my heart and I can see things clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're not wrestling against racism in this country. We're wrestling against good and evil. People that are good are good. People that are evil, they're going to find a reason to not like you and to do harm to you. Whether it's your race, your nationality, your city, your town, what ward you in. Come on, people. Come on, man. Let's put all this BS behind us. Let's put it all down. Let's stop with the madness. Let's hatred of the white man and the police. Put it down and you talk to that man in the mirror, that woman in the mirror, and you ask them simple questions. What have I done to make my life better? What have I done to make others' lives better who live around me? What do I plan to do in the future to leave this planet better than it was when I got here? Ask yourself those questions in the mirror. And when you have an adequate answer, you're a better place. If every person does that, everybody, no matter what you did, even if you're in a prison cell, look in your mirror in the prison cell and you ask yourself those questions. And when you have a solution to those questions and you have action behind those questions, the world will be a better place. And you don't need to worry about the government. You don't need to worry about systematic oppression. You need to worry about white privilege and all that other stuff that man put on top of your head to keep you down. You ain't have to worry about all that stuff. You can be free and you can be prosperous. I'm done.
Okay, this gentleman, who is quite eloquent, I think, is allegedly a former police officer. That's what the information, I have not verified it, but that's the information that I have on him. And he's not difficult to listen to. And you'll notice the symbols up in the upper left and upper right of your screen. I put those symbols there because those are symbols similar to the ones that I showed you about myself. This guy, because he values these symbols and what they stand for, is very different from the red symbols that you've seen before of the hammer and the sickle. His worldview is totally different from these revolutionaries, Antifa and RAM. Now, let's look at the unreality of the Britannica definitions of first socialism. Now, if you look there in the yellow, you see the word public rather than private ownership. Society as a whole should own at least control property. So those words are absolutely meaningless. They are lies, and I'm going to show you what they actually mean. Yes, this is the definition, but the words in the definition are misleading, shall we say, and that's to be kind. Let's move this definition forward. So, the idea is public ownership or society as a whole owning things rather than private ownership of your car, your house, whatever. Now, this boils it down and gets rid of the extra stuff. Public and society as a whole should own. So, or control. And if you have absolute control of something, it's the same as owning it. Public rather than private ownership of property and natural resources. So that would be water, air, coal, copper, wood, you name it, the natural resources. So we're still boiled down to public and society as a whole. Again, these things are misleading. Now I'm going to show you what it actually means, despite the fact that Britannica uses these words. Because, again, the words are put in there purposely to be misleading. Here's what it means. Socialism calls for government rather than private ownership. It's not public, it's government. And it's not society as a whole that should own or at least control property. It's government that should own or at least control property. That is the reality of socialism. Now let's go to the other word, and we'll see where this is likewise rather misleading, shall we say. Again, just to be kind. So let's break this down a little bit and get down to the brass tacks of what it's about. Again, this gets into it rather than saying public or society as a whole, this talks about communal control of at least the major means of production. That's mines, mills, and factories. Those are the things that make and get all the natural resources for you to have a fully assembled product. The computer you're looking at, the phone that's within 3 feet from you, okay? And so everybody who's listening to this has experienced the wonders and the good of capitalism. The car you have in the driveway, the house you're living in. All right, I'm boiling it down just a little bit. Communism aims to replace private property with public ownership. Notice we're into that public word again. And then you go down to the bottom. Exactly how communism differs from socialism has long been a matter of debate, but the distinction rests largely on the communists' adherence to the revolutionary socialism of Karl Marx. Now that RAM organization and the Antifa organization, they depend upon revolution, and the RAM organization, the very first word in their title is revolution. So violence is what it's about. Okay, let's boil it down a little more. Government ownership, not public, or government control, government of at least the major means of production, mines, mills, and factories, as I said before. Communism is a form of socialism, and that comes from Britannica, and I didn't really change that. And then I emphasize the idea of revolution there at the bottom. And these organizations are into that. So the burning, the looting, the tipping over of cars, the bashing in of windows, the bashing of people, that is revolutionary socialism. You're seeing it in our cities across the country.
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21 to be coordinated under the leadership of a specific office and at the direction of a high-level government official. The resolution also urges the United States to identify and initiate further agreements to protect the global environment and to support the creation of a high-level United Nations Sustainable Development Commission headed by an Undersecretary General. Third and lastly, the President is urged to report to Congress on the progress made on with this action. HCON Res 353 is supported by the administration. I have been in contact with the appropriate offices of the State Department and have incorporated their suggestions into the resolution. The 71 co-sponsors of this measure include one-half the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee and all of the House delegates to the Earth Summit. It is also supported by the major United States non-governmental organizations concerned with the environmental issues. The Earth Summit presented world leaders with an opportunity that should not be lost. We must now embark on a new course that will sustain our planet and its resources for the benefit of future generations. This resolution calls on the United States to assert its leadership to achieve this goal. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. Thanks again to the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee for their recognition of the importance and timeliness of this resolution. We must make the promise of Rio a reality. Thank you, Mr.
Nancy Pelosi, 1992. What she's referring to with the Rio Declaration is also referred to as Agenda 21. It is a so-called sustainable development bit of business. Again, that is meant to control capitalism. The climate crisis, the Green New Deal, all of these things are based upon what she just talked about. These are things that these folks want to enact so as to collapse capitalism, the very thing that sustains you and me, the very thing that gives us our jobs. So this really started in a big way in 1992. The next thing you're going to see is specifically about Agenda 21.
At its core, Agenda 21 is about control. Control of the land, natural resources, and entire populations. It seeks to control the air by regulation of carbon emissions, the ground by sustainable development, and the sea through environmental regulations. Officially stated, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. Because being human will always have an impact on the environment, Agenda 21 paves the way for extraordinary UN control. When you boil it down, there are 9 basic tenets of Agenda 21. Move citizens off private land and into urban housing. Create vast wilderness spaces inhabited by large carnivores. Eliminate cars and create walkable cities. Support chosen private businesses with public funds for sustainable development. make policy decisions that favor the greater good over individuals, drastically reduce the use of power, water, and anything else that creates carbon pollution, use bureaucracies to make sweeping decisions outside of democratic processes, increase taxes, fees, and regulations, and finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
This equation has four factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
The Earth just cannot handle the sheer number of humans who live here. Something has to give. And I believe that it's up to us who have lived a good life to make sure that our children will have the opportunity to live good lives too. I have lived a good life.
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 Finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
Every year, millions of imperfect babies are born, destined for a life of struggle and hardship. But it is the rest of us who pay the ultimate cost. Billions of dollars that could be used to better society are instead wasted on the malformed. There must be a better way, and there is. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
Finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
For millions of years, this lake thrived. But now it is dying. Poisoned by humans who put themselves above nature. It's time to stop the killing. It's time to heal our planet.
Finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
Controlling our every impact on the environment means controlling every aspect of our lives. What we eat, how we travel, where we live, how we live. But no is still an option.
Okay, that gives you an idea of what Agenda 21 is meant to be like. Those dramatizations about aborting poorly formed babies or ending the lives of older people, those were dramatizations as to how far this crazy thing could go. But what you saw about Bill Gates is absolutely just not imagined. It's dead on true. He is into population reduction. That's what he's into. Okay, now you're going to see again those 9 parts of Agenda 21. In the year 2012, we actually dealt with that agenda here in Sevier County, here in the Smoky Mountains. And so what I did after the 9 basic parts of Agenda 21 are listed, I make it local. So it's going to be different after you see the 9 things having to do with Agenda 21.
At its core, Agenda 21 is about control. Control of the land, natural resources, and entire populations. It seeks to control the air by regulation of carbon emissions, the ground by sustainable development, and the sea through environmental regulations. Officially stated, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. Because being human will always have an impact on the environment, Agenda 21 paves the way for extraordinary UN control. When you boil it down, there are 9 basic tenets of Agenda 21. Move citizens off private land and into urban housing. Create vast wilderness spaces inhabited by large carnivores. Eliminate cars and create walkable cities. Support chosen private businesses with public funds for sustainable development. Make policy decisions that favor the greater good over individuals. Drastically reduce the use of power, water, and anything else that creates carbon pollution. Use bureaucracies to make sweeping decisions outside of democratic processes. Increase taxes, fees, and regulations. And finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population. Controlling our every impact on the environment means controlling every aspect of our lives. What we eat, how we travel, where we live, how we live. But no is still an option.
While on the sea, the terrible glory, see how the boat of my life rolls with me. In fear of death and in deepest of anguish, Lord, hear my prayer, watch my soul on the sea. Save me, O merciful Father, forgive me. How has my life lived its ending, I see.
Time to bring this home. Home to East Tennessee, home to Sevier County. This map of our part of the world represents Sevier County in 2050. No one will be living in the red or the yellow areas at all. Making this map into reality would be federal taxpayer grant money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Transportation, assuming that local officials apply for and accept the funds. That money would facilitate implementation of this map, all based on the United Nations Plan for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, all initiated by our Smokies, our future advocates. The choice is yours, the socialist future as shown on this map, or a genuine American, genuine Tennessee, authentic Sevier County future. Say no to our Smokies, our future.
My youthful strength has been spent in the battle. Lord, now I beg you, have mercy on me.
But no is still an option.
The Tennessee cities that have signed on to this idiocy are Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Jackson, and some other cities, and that they just have no idea what they've signed on to do. But they'll find out if all of this continues. They will definitely find out. 3 other men and I got this movement stopped in our county, which would have become law. And the way that we did it was we found that document that you saw, where you saw about the natural resources and so on, public utilities, could not be privately owned but should be government owned, basically. Well, we got that report from the United Nations website, that Barcelona meeting, and that man that you saw there, the Smokies facilitator, Gianni Longo, that man, as a result of those statements, was kicked out by the 66 notable people in our county who no longer wanted to do this based upon what they found out about him through our work. He was gone with his $75K that those 66 people paid him. Gone. All right. Listen for a bit. Okay, what I wanted to show you there is that there are some aspects of this which can fool you and can look quite attractive. That was the Red Army Chorus singing for you. The music is beautiful. The classical dancing that they do and ballet is beautiful. But the system is as ugly as the man that you see there in the center, Che Guevara. His likeness is on t-shirts in colleges everywhere where he is looked upon as a hero. So we're going to see some of the characters involved in this, and just to his left and his right you see the symbols of the Communist Party of the United States. They are, instead of a hammer and a sickle, it's a hammer and a gear, indicating industry. Hammer and a sickle indicates agriculture. The raised fist that you see in the upper left and the lower right, that indicates the power of the people. You'll notice red, red, red. Now, if you look at this little diagram in the lower left of your screen, you'll see Karl Marx and Engels, who were the philosophers that really brought forth and established communism as a philosophy as we know it today. And its first and most fierce proponents, so they would have done that about 1848, but by about 1917 you see the man next to Friedrich Engels, the man with the goatee and the bald head, that man is Vladimir Lenin. He was the leader of the Communist Revolution and won out power over everything. He was then followed by Joseph Stalin, which you see just to the right of Lenin, and he was, well, we may speak of him just a little bit later. He was a very autocratic man, shall we say. lethal. There's another picture of Lenin that just popped up. You notice I'm staying with the red. And then up in the center top is Mao Zedong, who led the communist revolution in China in the late 1940s. Fidel Castro, who in combination with Che Guevara, who is in the very center there, those two are the ones that led the communist revolution in Cuba. Fidel ended up being the chief guy, and after 50 or more years as the communist leader in Cuba, his brother took over. Mikhail Gorbachev, he was the last chairman of the Communist Party in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, what we call Russia today. He was there when the Iron Curtain fell. He was there when communism collapsed economically because the system just does not work. Today he's doing other things. He's involved in the Green Revolution. Pol Pot, 1970s, Cambodia, 2 to 3 million people dead. He killed them. Just off to your far left is Nicolas Maduro, who followed Chavez as president of Venezuela, now fully a communist country and absolutely economically ruined, despite the fact that they have one of the largest oil reserves on the earth. And then you'll see the yellow hammer and sickle, and it's got several of the characters in there. At the very top of it is the present leader of China who declared himself, his name is Xi Jinping, and he declared himself president for life a couple of years ago, and so he is. And then we can't forget this cartoonish guy. The present president calls him Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un. We thought he was dead for a while recently, but apparently he reappeared. Either that or a body double reappeared. All of these are bad, evil men. Mao and Xi, they're going to be the ones we're going to concentrate on for just a little bit here. Mao is responsible for Chinese dead, starving them to death and executing people, somewhere between 40 and 65 million of his own people dead during the time that he was in charge, 1949 to 1976. Xi, if you look over to the right of your screen there, Xi, who is at the top of that group of men, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men, he's at the top center. Hong Kong is about, all of its freedoms are about to be gone. There are, as I had indicated before, there are concentration camps there, particularly dedicated to the Muslim population, which they intend to stomp out. There's religious persecution of other groups as well. Not any kind of religion, in fact, is persecuted, to include Buddhism, which I think originated in that country. And then, of course, we know that COVID-19 originated there, escaped from there, probably from that Wuhan laboratory. And the way that I characterize that word, the CO stands for communist of COVID. The VI stands for virus. So I just call it communist virus 19. Now, this man was recently running for president on the Democratic ticket, and let's hear about him. He styles himself as a democratic socialist. Well, let's look at the people that he associates with.
Democratic presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders claims to be a democratic socialist who wants America to be more like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway.
He wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. And what's wrong with that?
But is he telling you the truth? In 2014, Sanders endorsed longtime Communist Party supporter Chuy Garcia's bid for the Chicago mayoralty. Sanders spoke alongside Scott Marshall, a leader of the Chicago Communist Party. 1985, while serving as mayor of Burlington, Vermont, Bernie Sanders celebrated the 6th anniversary of the Marxist Sandinista takeover of Nicaragua with pro-Cuban leader Daniel Ortega. He also traveled to communist Cuba, later praising Fidel Castro for his wonderful government-run healthcare.
Just because Ronald Reagan dislikes these people does not mean to say that the people in their own nations feel the same way.
In 1988, Sanders and his new bride honeymooned in the former Soviet Union, where they negotiated to make Burlington a sister city of Yaroslavl, a city less than 160 miles from Moscow. The following year, Bernie Sanders addressed the 10th anniversary celebrations of the Communist Party-controlled US Peace Council, the American affiliate of the Soviet-dominated World Peace Council. Sanders spoke alongside such democratic socialists as Decima Williams from Grenadian President Morris Bishop's pro-Castro New Deal movement, and Zedi Terzi, a representative of Yasser Arafat's terrorist Palestine Liberation Organization. In his first congressional race, Bernie Sanders received the endorsement of journalism icon I.F. Stone. Stone was at the time a supporter of America's largest Marxist organization, Democratic Socialists of America. Stone praised Sanders for his pragmatic socialism. Stone would later be identified as a former long-time Soviet spy. Democratic Socialists of America support the theories of Karl Marx, Italian Communist Party leader Antonio Gramsci, and call for the complete government control of all business. Bernie Sanders has worked with Democratic Socialists of America for decades. They even funded and supported his first successful Senate race in 2006. A prominent Sanders supporter is Washington, D.C. Democratic Socialists of America leader Kurt Stand. Stand was recently released from a federal penitentiary after serving a 17-year sentence for spying on America for the former Soviet Union and Communist East Germany. Democratic Socialists of America are now effectively running Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, but the Marxists have deliberately tried to hide this from the American public. Socialists will always try to deceive you to get your support.
We are not communists.
Will you let Bernie Sanders fool you?
That concludes the presentation on the powers that are operating today in a lawless fashion, that are a threat to my family, the symbols that I hold dear and that I consider to be part of me. And some of these symbols apply to you as well. The cross, perhaps, the flag, and there are other symbols that you value. Well, these communists and socialists do not value those symbols. And they do not value you. They value power, control, and wealth. Because power and wealth go together and give complete control.